holy wow, this book. Boys don't have to be masculine if they don't want to be. This was the gayest book I read in June. I've let out so many breaths that I didn't know I was holding. What up, my channel? Welcome back to another video. I'm Jessie E. This is Ravenclaw, and you're watching. June was the best reading month I have ever had in my entire life. I read a total of 10 books. Now, one of them was a DNF and only one of them was a 4-star read. Now, the 4-star read is going to remain a mystery until my next video, which is going to be on disappointing reads. However, I will tell you about the book I DNF'd, which was How Not to Ask a Boy to Prom. I was really excited about this book because it features the fake dating trope from a queer lens. I personally really like hate to love stories because they're usually very slow burn. There's a lot of things that happen to create intimacy between two characters, and it makes the romance, the relationship between them, all that much more believable. However, I had to DNF this book because A, it introduced way too many characters at once. There were just so many characters' names that got dropped right away in the beginning of the story, but those characters weren't built in any way. They weren't given description. It was just kind of like reading a book about all of these faceless blobs, and usually I can kind of fill in the gaps, but when it's multiple characters who are being ill-described, it just pulls me out of the story and I feel like I'm reading a play. Next, I picked up Color Me In by Natasha Diaz. I received a NetGalley arc of this book. It tells the story of Nevaeh, who is a 16-year-old, very light-skinned biracial girl whose parents are getting divorced. Nevaeh is half Jewish and half black. Her father is a very wealthy lawyer who cheated on her mother and kind of devastated her mom, sending her into a depression, and her mom is pretty much just checked out of life. And it's basically about Nevaeh for the first time getting to really meet and engage with her blackness and the black side of her family. But Nevaeh is still attending this very suburban, mainly white, expensive prep school where her blackness is very visible. So the kids at her prep school see her as black, and then the black kids in her home neighborhood don't see her as black. And so she kind of just has this struggle where she doesn't fit in or belong anywhere, which is something that I personally relate to as somebody who was black and Mexican. So the book was just this amazing jumble of all these different themes, but they worked so well. I loved Nevaeh having to not only deal with her divorce, but also figure out what it means to be a biracial girl, what it means to be Jewish, what it means to be a good best friend. She is a writer and a poet, and so this book gave me a lot of Poet X vibes because it has a lot of poetry in it and a lot of prose. But the writing other than that is just very straightforward and elegant, but crisp and simple. So it's not too poetic. So if like you really struggled with the Poet X, you might actually really dig Color Me In because the writing style is not as lush as it was in the Poet X. I also really love the conversations about privilege. Nevaeh makes a lot of mistakes and she has to get called out and deal with those mistakes that she's made, and it just overall, I counted so many themes. It was a fantastic story, and I rated it 5 stars because I loved all of these things and how they were balanced in the book. I also even loved the representation for what it's like to live in New York City because I lived in New York City when I was young. That is where my parents met and fell in love. So New York is a city that is very close to my heart, and I loved like inner city New York culture that was depicted in the book. I did not like the way that fat characters were described and portrayed, but it was still a 5-star read in my heart just because the story resonated with me so much and so deeply, and I truly enjoyed it. However, do be aware that Natasha Diaz has some work to do in the way that people of size are described. The next book I read was Kings, Queens, and In-Betweens by Tanya Boteju. Y'all, holy wow, this book, this book. Namah Kumara Clark is as unremarkable as they come. She is in love with her best friend who is a straight girl. She lives in a small, mediocre town, and her mother has left her and her father a year ago, and she's still not recovered from that abandonment. But all of that changes when she meets Deirdre, who is a black drag queen, gorgeous, lush, absolutely talented. Deirdre takes Namah under her fabulous wing and turns Namah's boring life all the way upside down. I don't even deserve this book. The trans representation and the conversations about gender identity were fire. They were amazing. The morally gray character in this book is actually my favorite character in the book. Absolutely adore them. I love the relationship between Namah and her father. We don't get a lot of representation for like really healthy relationships between girls and their dads, and I just loved their banter, and I loved who he was as a person. Like, he accepted Namah's queerness, so the story didn't have to be about Namah coming out, like it just was accepted. I love seeing representation for parents who are just down with their queer kids and support and love them. It was this beautiful, awesome coming of age story. I love the representation for drag culture. I absolutely adored like the carnival representation because there's a carnival in this town. There were so many fantastic characters. I like literally can't talk about this book with any level of articulation. I had to bookmark all of her little lines that she thinks to herself in various situations because they were cracking me up. In her head, she would say things like, "Dear God of everything gay." And she gets herself into so many awkward, humiliating, embarrassing situations that you just empathize with. I felt like I was living it. I felt like I was there. You know, when authors try and describe an emotion or a scene or a feeling and it just feels really fake, this book does not do that. It feels real. Okay, so I'm gonna give you another quick excerpt. By the time I got home, I'd had plenty of time to replay the events of the previous night over and over again. Each time, I was able to remember some detail that made the whole situation even more horrifying. Like, don't we all do that though? Don't we just sit in our cars on our drive home and just rehash the situation and bask in the true glory of our own insignificance? Sorry, got a little dark there. You should. I also read Her Royal Highness by Rachel Hawkins. Her Royal Highness is actually number 2 in her Royals series, but you don't have to have read book 1 in order to understand book 2. Millie Quint is as run-of-the-mill as they come. She is a nerdy Ravenclaw of a science geek who girls aren't exactly lining up to date. However, when she catches her girlfriend kissing somebody else, she decides to move to Scotland to attend a very prestigious prep school to have the truly elite academic experience that she's always craved. However, her plans are thrown out the window when she meets her roommate, Flora, who acts like a total princess. Except she is a princess, the Princess of Scotland. These two girls absolutely cannot stand one another, but when they go on a camping trip and get lost in the wilderness, they just might find some common ground. I loved this story. It was so freaking funny. Now you guys know, y'all know that comedy in books is just not my thing because usually it rings false. This was funny. I was laughing so much. I flew through this book. I enjoyed it. I was there. Dig the boarding school atmosphere. I love books that are set in boarding schools. Maybe I should do a book set in boarding school recommendations video. I loved the way that boys were represented in this book. One of my favorite characters is assumed to be gay because of his mannerisms and the way that he speaks and walks and things, but he is heterosexual. And so it was really interesting to get representation for a guy who just isn't traditionally masculine. And I love that because like boys don't have to be masculine if they don't want to be. Boys don't have to fit into this specific mold of what we think boys need to be. Millie, the main character, is bisexual. I really loved the bisexual rep in this book. I love how Millie stood up for her bisexuality and was proud of who she was, and it just, it rocked. So in my June TBR video, I let y'all pick a book to add to my TBR. I gave you 3 choices: Love and Lies of Roksana Ali, 100 Days of Sunlight, and Aurora Rising. And the winner was Love and Lies of Roksana Ali. When Bengali-American teenager Roksana is caught kissing her girlfriend, her conservative Muslim parents freak out and promptly send her to her family in Bangladesh. Roksana is then forced into an arranged marriage against her will, but even though she is hundreds of miles away from the love of her life, she will stop at absolutely nothing to get back to her. I listened to the audiobook and wow, it was absolutely incredible. My favorite part of this book were the interactions that Roksana had both with her family, with her inner self, and with her friends. Her white friends really don't understand what it's like for her to be queer and Muslim. One of the hardest parts about this book was seeing how much her mother favored her brother over her. And so seeing the different layers of expectations that are put on her shoulders was really tough for me, but I also related a lot as somebody who grew up in a Latinx household, because let me tell you, my brother got away with freaking murder because he was a boy. He was allowed to stay out later. He was allowed to get worse grades than me and still have more privileges. And anytime I did something that was bad or wrong, I would get punished so much more than him because I was a girl. The story took a lot of turns. There were a lot of aspects that had my heart pounding because I was so scared for her. Roksana's grandmother was probably my favorite character in the book, my favorite part of the story. At one point, Roksana begins to read her grandmother's diary and the things that she finds out about her mother and the way that her grandmother lived growing up and the levels of suffering and oppression that they both had to endure. And even though the things that her parents did were wildly unacceptable, I still appreciated getting to see their perspective. Overall, I really recommend this book. It's definitely a celebration of Bengali culture. It was absolutely beautiful to read. There were definitely times, like lines and paragraphs that really just didn't hit home for me. There were some things about the writing style that I just didn't like, but the absolute story itself is phenomenal. I will say major trigger warnings for child abuse and physical violence. It is a story that I am really, really glad that you guys picked for me, and I can't wait to see what you pick for me next month in August. I also finally finally read The Astonishing Color of After. Why did y'all let me wait so long? I will be absolutely shocked if this book doesn't make my favorites of 2019 list. Lei is a half-white, half-Taiwanese girl who embarks on the journey of a lifetime when her mother dies from suicide and transforms into a red bird. When Lei begins to see and be visited by this bird, she goes to Taiwan to meet her grandparents for the first time and to figure out what happened to her mother. Lovers of truly poetic lyrical writing and magical realism are going to just be obsessed with the story. I am completely obsessed with The Astonishing Color of After. The writing and the imagery, it felt like I was there. And it didn't feel ostentatious or pretentious. It just felt right. Lei is a beautiful, amazing artist, and she has a wonderful relationship with a white and Filipino boy named Axel. She and Axel are best friends. They're both artists, although Axel is more of a musician. And I just loved their friendship. I love the representation for young artists, for being biracial and the conversations that they have about that. Her father is a very morally gray character who I personally can't stand, but I was really interested in seeing his motivations and his side of the story. And you get more of the story of what happened leading up to her mother's death, because in Taiwan, Lei finds these incense sticks that allow her to relive the memories of her parents. Lei also has synesthesia, which is a condition where stimuli is converted into color imagery. I have an incredibly mild form of synesthesia, so it was actually really nice to read a story with a main character who uses colors to describe everything from her feelings to how she navigates the world. This book totally lived up to the hype for me. It was so good. I cannot believe that I waited so long to read it. Another 5-star read was Miracle Creek by Angie Kim. This was probably in my top 5 anticipated books. It did not disappoint me, but I'm not going to talk about it in this video because I'm doing a series very soon that involves this book. So stay tuned for that. All I will say for now is that I loved it and I can't wait to talk to you about it. Now I finally got my hands on Hot Dog Girl, which came out in April and was another one of my most anticipated reads, and it did not let me down, y'all. Lou Parker is determined to have the best summer of her life before she moves to college and everything changes. She auditions to work at her local amusement park, hoping to get an absolutely glamorous job, and instead gets cast as a singing hot dog. Now Lou is bisexual and really wants to get the attention of a boy she's had it bad for quite some time, so being cast as a giant singing hot dog just wasn't a part of the plan. Now when Lou finds out that Magic Castle Playland, the park where her parents met and fell in love, is going to close, she also goes on a mission to keep it open and make sure that this very magical place does not shut down. There's some really legitimate criticisms for this book, mainly that it has cheating in it. And also, Lou starts fake dating her female best friend in order to catch Nick's attention, Nick being the boy that Lou is in love with. I personally wasn't bothered by that because I felt like Lou was absolutely called out for that behavior. It was painted as completely unacceptable that she was using her queer female best friend to catch a boy's attention. Yeah, there was cheating in the book, but the cheating was totally portrayed as non-acceptable and negative and not something that should be perpetuated. I totally understand why a lot of people didn't like this book, but those just weren't issues for me personally. I also really loved the relationship between Lou and her dad. This was another book that had a queer female main character who has a single father, and I really appreciated that. Actually, both Her Royal Highness, Kings, Queens, and In-Betweens, and Hot Dog Girl have loner queer female main characters who have single dads that are all amazing. I personally thought the book was really funny and awkward, and Lou is a very morally gray main character. She is very selfish. She treats her friends horribly, wildly self-centered. She's very reactionary. Like, she is called out for these things, and I thought that she had a great character growth arc. I like seeing a character make a lot of mistakes and just be a total shitball, but then learn and grow from being a shitball. I personally would rather have a character that is deeply and utterly flawed than characters that are just perfect. So this book was a 5-star read for me, and I feel like I'm just betraying everybody. But I really loved it. And my final 5-star read for the month of June is Namah by Sarah Blake. This was on my highly anticipated releases list. I've let out so many breaths that I didn't know I was holding. Now, we all know the biblical story of Noah and the ark, but what would life have been like as Noah's wife? In the Bible, Noah's wife is never given a name, so Sarah Blake took it upon herself to correct that, named her Namah, and this is a book about what it would have been like to be the matriarch of Noah's family. I was not expecting this book to be queer. This was the gayest book I read in June. The sex scenes, the steamy, the steam, all the steam. It was like a sauna. The prose is very almost like hallucinatory. It's very sensory, it's very abstract, there's a lot of magical realism. Namah begins to have a relationship with this angel that lives and breathes underwater, so there's like a mermaid element. There are a lot of talking animals. There are a lot of elements up to this story that are absolutely fantastical. But I also really loved the down-to-earth elements too. There were so many scenes describing the logistics of building an ark and caring for animals, little tiny details that I never would have thought about. And I think it's amazing that Sarah Blake put all of those details in the book, but still had such a great fantasy element. Namah is also a very complex and wonderful character. She is strong and powerful and bold and brave and just all of the things, but she's also insecure. She's weak in some points. She's full of questions and desires that she doesn't completely understand, mainly about God himself and her anger with God for killing everybody that she knows and loves. This is a really great book for people who are religious and also who are not religious. I am not religious, and this book was just absolutely perfect for me. Namah has a lot of sex in this book that is not with Noah, her husband, and it's never really addressed. Like, it's never addressed if they have an open relationship, if they're polyamorous, like what the deal is. It's never painted as cheating, so I'm really not sure whether she is cheating on Noah in these encounters or what the deal is with their relationship. So again, if that's something you're sensitive to, maybe not the book for you. I highly, highly, highly recommend this book. I actually can't recommend it enough, and I'm so grateful that Sarah sent it to me. All right, y'all, that is gonna do it for this video. Let me know in the comment section below if you have any questions, which of these books sound great, which sound horrible. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I would absolutely love it if you would join my Dapper family. If you want more daily content from me, hit me up, follow me on my Instagram, because I post lots of unboxings, discussions, and rants every single day. Until next time, stay sharp, and I will see you in my next video.